everyone, and welcome back to Plena's Pages, or welcome if you're new here. Today we're carrying on with part 3 of Beloved, the final part, a happier part today. Last time we left off with a very difficult part emotionally, with Beloved and Sethi and Denver living in the same house and everyone else leaving them, but part 3 is just a little bit better. So part 3 starts off with 124 was quiet. Denver, who thought she knew all about silence, was surprised to learn hunger could do that, quiet you down and wear you out. Neither Sethi nor Beloved knew or cared about it one way or another. They were too busy rationing their strength to fight each other. In this final part of the book, Beloved demands constant attention from her mother. She's getting her revenge, and Sethi wants to get that revenge because she feels guilty. And so what she does is she gives Beloved her undivided attention. She quits her job, well, to be more precise, she's fired because she stops showing up, and she spends all her life saving to make Beloved happy. She buys her these pretty dresses, she gives her all of her attention, she bakes her the best food. She wants Beloved to forgive her. And Denver realizes that it's not Beloved she should be worried for. It's not Beloved who's going to be killed by Sethi, it's the other way around, because it's not critical that Beloved isn't eating, but it is that Sethi isn't. Flesh between her mother's forefinger and thumb was thin as China silk, and there wasn't a piece of clothing in the house that didn't sag on her. Beloved held her head up with the palms of her hands, slept wherever she happened to be, and whined for sweets, although she was getting bigger, plumper by the day. Everything was gone except 2 laying hens, and somebody would soon have to decide whether an egg every now and then was worth more than 2 fried chickens. The hungrier they got, the weaker. The weaker they got, the quieter they were, which was better than the furious arguments, the poker slammed up against the wall, all the shouting and crying that followed that one happy January when they played. And it only gets worse as accusations from Beloved continue. And Sethi makes it worse. It's almost like a never-ending loop because Sethi wants Beloved to hear her out, so every time she starts whispering, "I did it because I loved you," and Beloved takes that personally, and she behaves even worse every time Sethi brings up the incident. It's like a never-ending loop that they got themselves into, and it's wearing each other out, but Beloved seems to be profiting from the attention, whereas Sethi seems to be receding back from her very existence. Beloved undressed, the little curved shadow of a smile in the coochie coo place under her chin. When Sethi saw it, fingered it, and closed her eyes for a long time, the two of them cut Denver out of the games. The cooking games, the sewing games, the hair and dressing up games. Games her mother loved so well she took to going to work later and later each day until the predictable happened. Sawyer told her not to come back, and instead of looking for another job, Sethi played all the harder with Beloved, who never got enough of anything. Lullabies, new stitches, the bottom of the cake bowl, the top of the milk. If the hen had only 2 eggs, she got both. It was as though her mother had lost her mind, like grandma baby calling. It only gets worse after this. It only gets worse the more that Sethi is reminded of what she did to Beloved, and the more that Beloved leeches her dry. And eventually they run out of things, and that's when Beloved invented desire. She wanted Sethi's company for hours, to watch the layer of brown leaves waving at them from the bottom of the creek in the same place where, as a little girl, Denver played in the silence with her. Now the players were altered. As soon as the saw was complete, Beloved gazed at her. The house grows quiet with all the conflict, and Denver remembers her grandma's wisdom and vision about asking for help and not letting Sethi's pride get in the way. Because Sethi is a prideful woman, and that pride may be directed in a positive direction towards her daughters, but it's also harming them in the process because pride and hubris is ultimately a sin, and I think that's what Beloved was trying to show here, because the moment that Denver steps over herself and over all of the things that her mother had taught her, that's the moment when she gets help. She decides to go to Lady Jones' house, her teacher, as you remember from the previous chapter, where where Denver was always fascinated with like writing and reading, and she had a talent towards it up until she went deaf because of Beloved. And she goes to Lady Jones' house, and of course she doesn't know the way because it's been years and Denver hasn't set foot outside, but she lets her feet lead her. Again, it's that motif of feet being the only thing that a slave can rely on, the only thing that was truly theirs to own. We find out more about Lady Jones because Denver's feet do lead her there, and Lady Jones instantly recognizes her as Denver. And Lady Jones is a mixed woman with like pale blonde hair, and because she's more pale, that's what got her picked for a school in Cincinnati. So schools weren't obliged to serve Black people, hospitals weren't obliged to serve them, but there was one colored school in Cincinnati, and Lady Jones got picked because of her white skin. And then what she did was she repaid her luck by teaching all the kids who weren't picked. Lady Jones believed in her heart that except for her husband, the whole world, including her children, despised her and her hair. After she tells Lady Jones of her troubles, Lady Jones begins to provide them with food, and she tells all the neighbors, who begin to provide them with food as well. And they leave it on the front porch, and Denver doesn't exactly know whose food it is, but she just goes to the door that she thinks provided it, and she says thank you. They whispered, naturally, wondered, shook their heads. Some even laughed outright at Denver's clothes of a hussy, but it didn't stop them caring whether she ate, and it didn't stop the pleasure they took in her soft thank you. But Beloved and Sethi show no signs of being grateful to Denver and instead continue their fight. As Beloved grows fatter and Sethi recedes from existence, it only gets progressively worse. Whenever Beloved thinks that Sethi isn't giving her attention, she claws at her throat and she yells, rain, rain, and this makes Sethi go even more insane. And Denver realizes that they're never going to thank her. They're indifferent as to whether there's food on the table. All they care about is each other, and that's when she goes out to seek jobs at the Bodwins, rather. So she goes to knock on their door, and Janie, their helper, a black woman, opens the door, and she recognizes her instantly as Baby Sug's skin, which is what makes her let her in. And she tells her that Denver better tell her the story as it is. And so Denver tells her that there's a visiting cousin, and her mother is sick and ill, and she can't provide for them, and that's why she's out there looking for help. And that's when Janie puts it together. She tells Denver that the Bodwins are getting old, that they might die soon, so they're gonna need all the extra help, and she will convince them to hire her. And she also figures out that it's the ghost of Beloved coming back to haunt Sethi, and she spreads the rumors around the black community. On Friday, as the rumors spread that Beloved is back and a baby ghost is treating a woman, even if it's Sethi, who they don't like this, the 30 women agree to show up. And so on Friday, the day that Bodwin is supposed to come and pick Denver up for her first night shift, the 3 women come with pots and pans and whatever things they have, and they start to sing and to try and drive Beloved out. It's almost like a ceremony, back what Baby Suggs used to do. And even Ella shows up, because for her this is another opportunity to measure what could very well be the devil himself against the lowest yet. There was also something very personal in her fury. Whatever Sethi had done, Ella didn't like the idea of past errors taking possession of the present. Sethi's crime was staggering, and her pride outstripped even that, but she could not countenance the possibility of sin moving on in the house, unleashed and sassy. Daily life took as much as she had. The future was sunset, the past something to leave behind. And if it didn't stay behind, well, you might have to stomp it out. Slave life, freed life, every day was a test and a trial. Nothing could be counted on in a world where even when you were a solution, you were a problem. In a mirroring of the scene where the slave owners showed up to 124, now the black community comes to help instead. Just as Baby Suggs didn't expect the white people to show up and look the other way, likewise Denver doesn't expect the black community to come and help, and she's looking to the right. She's expecting Bodwin to come and help her, Bodwin the white man, to come and give her a job to cure her problems. And here we have a little detour to talk about Mr. Bodwin, who is a very recognizable figure because of his white hair and big black mustache whenever they depicted local political antagonism. So that's back when the Civil War was at its peak and when he was actually fighting for black rights. 20 years ago, when the society was at its height and opposing slavery, it was as though his coloring was itself the heart of the matter. The bleached was what his enemies called him, and on a trip to Arkansas, some Mississippi River men, enraged by the boatmen they competed with, had caught him and shoe-blackened his face and his hair. Those heady days were gone now. What remained was the sludge of ill will, dashed hopes, and difficulties beyond repair. A tranquil republic? Well, not in his lifetime. So he was the one who defended Sethi, who managed to stop the incident from damaging the whole movement, because when you're trying to build a case that black people are people too, that slaves should be liberated, and then a woman goes and does what Sethi did, it resonates across America globally as a whole society. And so that's what he tried to fix, and he managed to turn it around and build as a further case, like, look, this is what slavery drove people to do instead. And he built it into a further case for abolishing slavery with years full of spite and conviction. Sethi is holding an ice pick and she's chipping away at a block of ice, all to make Beloved comfortable, to make her cool down because Beloved is too hot when the Bodwin comes to her house, and hearing the women sing, Sethi and Beloved go out onto the porch, and that's when she sees him, and that's when she has a flashback. Them and leaving behind Beloved behind alone again. Then Denver running too, away from her to the pile of people out there. They make a hill of black people falling, and above them all, rising from his place was a whip in his hand, the man without skin, looking. He's looking at her. So she charges him with an ice pick, and she doesn't recognize that it's the kind Mr. Bodwin the whole black community admires, and she races with an ice pick to kill him to protect Beloved, and luckily Ella steps in and she punches her and she knocks her out before she can do it. But with this scene, she manages to absolve her guilt, because this is it. This time she fights back to protect. And notice how Lady Jones isn't actually in the scene because she doesn't believe that it's a ghost. She thinks that this is beyond her. Of course it isn't a ghost, it's just a cousin. What's the big deal? But she still provides them with food and she still provides them with help. People can help in different ways. And the final scene leads to healing and the acceptance of a community. This is the climax that we've been going to. It's not Paul D leaving Sethi. It's not Beloved coming back. It's this. It's the collective healing. Because look at what happened. Denver looks the other way. The black community comes to help them. The black community doesn't turn away. The white man comes to help them instead of being there to hurt him. And Sethi runs and she goes to what she thinks is the source of the problem. She doesn't take the escape route and try to rid her children of the world in an effort to save them. She instead attacks those who are actually guilty. And Sethi rushes into the crowd of black women, and that's what makes Beloved gone, because Sethi is now embraced and Beloved feels absolved. And in chapter 27, Here Boy returns to 124, and people talk of Beloved and think that she exploded right before their eyes. Paul D returns and reverses his route out of the house. So just like he made his way out of the house into the shed and then out, now he makes his way into the shed and into the house and towards Sethi. And when he goes to work, he sees Denver, who's going to look for a job at a shirts factory, and he thinks to himself about how mature she looks, about how grown up, about how sophisticated she looks, and he thinks to himself, wow, she can look me in the eye, she's finally a woman. And she looks him in the eye and she treats him with respect. There's none of this dislike and distrust, a childish jealousy that thinks that my mother is going to another man. There's only the desire for her mother to find love again, because she tells Paul D that he better treat her right. He sees Sethi lying in Baby Suggs' room, and she's lying under the towel, and it's almost like Baby Suggs. She wants to run away from existence, and he steps in before that can happen, and he runs her a bath, and he rubs his feet, and he thinks to himself of the day that they were trying to escape and Sethi saw him. His neck jewelry, it's 3 wands like attentive baby rattlers, curving 2 feet into the air, and he chooses to preserve her dignity like she preserved his. And he thinks back to his relationship with Beloved and realized it wasn't even fun. He felt as if he was a fish, beached and gobbling air, and his release from Beloved is like a return from some ocean deep place he once belonged to. So in a way, all of the characters have been rebirthed from their experience. Sethi emerges a new woman, absolved from guilt. Beloved goes back to the grave and forgives her mother. Paul D returns and finds an attempt at a new life with none of this guilt, and Denver grows up. Paul D thinks to how Sixto defined love as the pieces I am, she gathered them and give them back to me in all the right order. And he realizes he loves Sethi, and by massaging her back to life, he expresses his love to her, and he allows her to lean on him and to confess her sins once again. And this time it's different because she doesn't try to justify it, she just says, she was my best thing. But Paul D ends the story by telling her, your best thing, Sethi, you are. And this is a reminder to not only Sethi, but to all of the readers about the nature of trauma and about the nature of healing, and realizing that you're not defined by your experiences, but rather how you get away from those experiences. And the final chapter ends with Beloved gone, and it allows room for them all to breathe, and the gossip slowly disappears. Nobody whispers about Beloved anymore because it's not a story to pass on. And Sethi and Denver, of course they can't forget. They're reminded by the rustling of a skirt, by footprints by the creek. But eventually Beloved is disremembered and unaccounted for. Because at the end of the story, only her name remains, Beloved, as a poignant reminder of what went through, but also as a reminder that they've healed and they moved on, and now Beloved is just that. A name, an expression of love rather than a ghost that comes to haunt you with your traumatic past. Morrison ends Beloved with a peace. And Ceci and Denver simply move on with their lives, and the river, the creek, it still continues to move on. The creek is the water is a recurring motif, and it's a symbol of life, of womanhood, of the passage of time, and it continues to flow because life moves on. No matter the things you've experienced, of course, they'll be with you for the rest of your life, but now it's just a distant memory of beloved, a whisper, nothing more. And the river moves on, and everyone moves on with their life. And I think Morrison urges all of us to do that, to remember history, to never forget, but to not let it consume us to the point that Sethi had let it, to not let it damage our life, and to not let it damage our healing journeys. And with that, I'm very happy to say that that's the end of our beloved journey too. So thank you so much for making it this far. I'm ever thankful for all the views and all the comments that you guys leave. It means a lot to me, and I'm very happy that we could all join and talk about this book all together. So good luck to everyone who's taking an exam on this, and I will see you next week.